to go from, NBC to Fortune and now to like running a brokerage, how do you manage like your stress? What would you say is like something you do when you feel unfocused?
Well, first of all, that's a very, very good question, because it doesn't get any easier. That's for sure.
Yeah, because you can manage more and you feel more confident to do things.
And I think,
and experienced before.
Yeah, and I think that the first thing is, when I'm in a tough spot, I've learned to go back to basics. I really have. For as successful as we can be, if you actually read through history and you go back and revisit the challenges that humankind has had in all walks of life, you're going to find the position that you're in has been repeated over and over again, and great minds, thinkers, people alike have gone through it, and they've actually documented what they've gone through. And so basically what I try and do is, the first thing is, I think food is very important, and what I try to do is I start to eat better, because sometimes we kind of veer off track, and maybe we drink a little more than we were drinking before, or we eat more carbs, things like that. So I take a look at what I'm eating, and I start to go back to just eating very healthy.
When you feel unfocused?
Yes, for sure.
So you feel unfocused, you're foggy, and you're like, man, it must have been.
So the first thing I do,
that were a little
actually, on the contrary, avocados I take away carbs, and that's.
It's really carbs, huh?
It's really carbs, so carbs, what they do is they fog my mind. They have, of course, different people react differently, but they fog my mind, so I eliminate them. And what ends up happening is that my thought process gets enhanced almost immediately. This takes me about 2-3 days. I also every now and again use intermittent fasting. And what that happens is it leaves the room that for the energy that your body was using to break down, whatever it was that you were consuming, and it just leaves that energy really for your thought processes.
Wow.
So that's one of the things that I do.
Digesting food is a lot of energy.
For sure.
It's a lot of energy on your
For
body.
sure. And then the next thing is I start to exercise more than I was at that moment, and I've been very inconsistent in the past with my exercise routine, but years ago, I used to have a very, very strict regimen of going at 5 a.m. every single day to the gym. So I know what it takes, to kind of get back into that. And then eventually what happens is I do these changes, and within a week and a half at the most, wherever I was in my focus level, I really probably double that, and then I go back to basics. And by that, and that would be the third thing, what I do is I really dissect the problem and take the emotion away from the problem. So normally we consider...
Sorry to interrupt, but typically what is causing you unfocused? Like, is that what you're kind of referring to?
Emotional. Because your unfocusedness, or your inability to concentrate really normally comes from a state of mind, or from a state of even being, if you want. So what ends up happening is that you're in a lull, but that lull is also an emotional lull. So the first 2 steps that I gave you was I make sure that I bring up my energy level so that I can strengthen my emotion stability. And then once I reach that, then it's all right, let's dissect the problem and see it for what it is. And the way that I go about it is I take away the emotion from the problem, and I say, this is what you have, and I start to see it from a viewpoint or a vantage point of just numbers. And by that I mean if it's pros and cons, how many pros, how many cons, and I start to weigh the decisions that we have to make, and I just put it into numbers.
That takes some time. It seems like you just said, like, within a week.
Within a week, week and a half, I'm able to
So these are for
react.
really big things that you need to focus on.
Yeah.
And a lot of the minor things you don't need to focus on. It doesn't really matter.
So it's a good question, actually, because it's not that the smaller things don't matter, because I think that the devil is in the details. But I think that when you get to a point, I think what I've done is I've tried to already delegate and put things in place around me where the smaller things are taken care of, so
right,
that
so you
I
don't
can
have to think about it and you're able to make a big decision.
Exactly. And
what about quick decisions that are really, really important? Do you ever face that as a broker?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Because you're talking about putting out fires.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, there's two things that happen. Because there's two sides in my view to that question. The first thing is, when it comes to putting out fires, just my critical thinking jumps in and I'm, on the spot. I mean, it's like an overdrive that takes over, and for some reason, I'm used to taking decisions that will get me past whatever it is that's happening, and that's kind of like an automatic. That may have been something that I trained myself on.
You depend mostly on like intuition.
And I just exactly past experiences. That's exactly it. But then the other thing is, as you grow older and as you have more experience,
You're 36, right?
I'm actually 40 now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually 40. And just turned 40 this year.
Older,
yeah.
40
So
you have some experience under your belt there.
Of course. So what happens?
Still young, though, right?
Yeah.
In the business
I
world,
feel young.
How does that reflect in the business world, though?
I think it actually does.
People say, for example, when you have the gray hairs, people trust you more. Or something
I think
like
people do tend to hear you out more once you pass 35. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean to say that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't mean to say that if you're young and bright and you're very, very smart, it's not like people won't pay attention to you. But I just think that in a general sense, people relate age to how volatile you are.
How volatile you are.
And
in what sense?
And in the sense that there may be some volatility or let's say aggressiveness or anxiety
like
into exactly.
Like younger people traits, and then when you're older, you're more wise and calm.
You're wiser, you're calmer. You let things develop more organically than you would. You try not to push as much. You also understand that there is a moment for pushing, and there's also a moment for kind of stepping back and letting things develop.
Right.
And things tend out to start to take their own place, and at that moment you go in and kind of close, and I think that's an amazing point of experience that I can tell you that I've finally been able to detail. But I don't want to leave something out from your question before, which was how you put fires and when you have to make last minute decisions and things.
Yeah.
So here's the thing about that.
If you're unfocused at that point, what do?
I don't take a decision when I'm unfocused, and I actually say,
you just offset it.
Yeah. I say this is not the right moment to take a decision, and I wait until I've put myself into a position where I can take a better decision, and by that I mean either that means I need to really reevaluate, and weigh everything out. But I think as I grow older, what happens less and less is I make sure that I avoid situations where people make me make a decision on the spot. And what happens is
the worst
exactly
offers that you receive.
Precisely. And so what I do is, I don't make a decision.
There's no time to talk to your attorney. You can't read the contracts right now.
I don't believe in that. So, yeah, there's always time.
Right?